Hello and welcome to That's So Craven. We are here today for a quick take as news starts to trickle through of Joao Palhinha's transfer to Bayern Munich. Reported £43 million with some additional add-ons as well. Joining me just to chat through this one late at night here in Perth, Western Australia, Elton. Dad, how are we going tonight?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks, Jack. Yeah, I think it's important that we pop our heads up and make some comments on this because it's significant news for the club, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talked about this just the other day when we actually recorded the podcast back after a month or so, and this Palhinha news has been rolling on for, I think I saw it mentioned 300 and something days since he almost left for Bayern Munich last time round. Dad, is it just nice to have this one finally all finished and wrapped up? Admittedly, there's some conversation to be had around the final fee, but are we just happy that the sort of saga is over now?
Yeah, this is not a surprise. I think anyone who's shocked and uh, uh, you know knocked over by this really has spent no time getting used to the fact that this was very inevitable at some point. So I'm okay with it. I think the only uh, point in question was what the final figure would be and whether that would be a fair return to Fulham, not purely in financial terms, but just in terms of enabling us to move on with the next phase. And by all accounts, I think it's there or thereabouts. I think it's reasonable. But most importantly, it's happened early, and it gives us a good chance to be ready, set for the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we ran a few polls in the off season. One of them being, what do you think the final offer or the final bid that Fulham should accept should be for Palhinha? And 53% of people agreed that it was around the 50 million mark. The majority saying around that sort of area. We've obviously fallen just short of that, but do we still think it's a fair price? Do you think Fulham have come out on top here, considering he was bought for 20 million a couple of years ago? He's 29. Does it feel like a fair deal, or do we feel like we've maybe lost out a little bit?
Whenever you have someone coming in very hard for one of your assets, you're always going to be tempted to optimize it and feel like you've extracted the very best price possible to match their interest, right? But I think this is going to be one that we're going to look back on and feel pretty good about and feel that it's fair. We've made a good economic profit on it. He's been a good servant to the club. We've enjoyed, from a fan perspective, we've really enjoyed his performances. We've enjoyed his passion. He's really invigorated um, the team. He's sort of transformed Fulham into a pretty tough team to come up against, and you're going to get a tough game in the midfield, and that's really enjoyable. I think it instills a lot of pride in the fan base. So, I think this is going to be one of those that we will look back on it in weeks and years and months to come, and think that we've this is good for the club. And we've done well.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter. There's obviously a heap of activity happening at the moment on Twitter around this transfer and the news that's filtering through. But as someone's mentioned, in the last 12 months, we've sold Mitrovic and Palhinha for around a combined 100 million, two 29-year-olds.
Yeah,
Obviously,
it's huge.
top-class players, but for Fulham to actually cash in, and we're pretty harsh on Fulham sometimes, I think fairly most of the time, the fact that Fulham struggle to actually cash in on players when we look at some of the guys we've signed and then released on freeze a few years later, to actually make this deal happen and get a half decent fee for it. Like you said, make a profit, sign a player for 20 million, get the best years out of him realistically, and then move him on for a profit at the end of that, I think it does turn out to be a good deal. Would I have liked to have got 60 million? Do I think he's worth 60 million? Yes. But, I was having a look at when Fulham usually return to training, and we're about 10 days, 2 weeks away from the Fulham players actually returning to Motspur Park. You don't want this dragging on while the players are coming back. Palhinha probably doesn't come back to training if there's a transfer saga going on. If he does, it's a bit frosty, a bit awkward knowing that he's not going to be there for much longer. I'd much rather us actually get this deal done and have the next couple of weeks to just focus on bringing in new faces. Because I think the longer you leave that, the worse it gets. And so I'm hoping that this is a bit of a catalyst. And as I said in our little sort of private chat, the next couple of weeks are really key here for Fulham now, how we respond to losing a key player. Because we saw last season when we lost Mitrovic, we did not respond well. We didn't have the time or the ability to actually replace him. I'm hoping now, because we lose Palhinha a much earlier time in pre-season, we've actually got the time to bring someone in and properly embed them in the squad. How do you see this sort of evolving? There's lots of chat around Andre and a few other targets. Do you see Fulham now actually being able to move quickly now that we've got time and obviously the funds there as well?
Well, again, referencing our internal chat that we were having earlier today, you would hope that this is a real confidence boost to the board and the executive team, that they've actually, injected a lot of money into the coffers here, and you hope that that's going to embolden them and give them a lot of confidence to actually do business that they may or may not have done. And if the Mitrovic money has not yet been spent, theoretically, and you add another 40 odd million pounds to that, it's probably going to be net out to be less than that by the time Sporting get a cut of it, and whatever else, all the detail that we may not be privy to. But it's still a very significant amount of money. A, it's a profit. B, it's a surplus. And so you want to hope that this will kind of release the shackles, and we will go in and feel like perhaps we can, sweeten any deal for a really important player like an Andre, that as a young player that we can see a real future in, and we can get them in early, get Marco get his hands on them, get them down to Motspur Park, and get a good month out of them in terms of preparation. I mean, that would be an absolutely perfect scenario. Don't know if we're going to see that, but to answer your question, you hope that this is going to create a bit of a domino effect and spark a series of key purchases because of some early transfer window confidence, if you like, having done this deal. That's what I'm hoping.
Confidence. You'd hope that there's a bit of a knock-on effect here. We've been linked with the right players, I'd say, for a decent amount of time now. If you look at players like Andre, Scott McTominay, Florentino Luis, Baumgartner, these are all names that we know well now, because obviously, as a few people have mentioned, there seems to have been some sort of gentleman's agreement between Fulham and Bayern that Palhinha would be allowed to leave as long as Bayern sort of matched our valuation. That's obviously happened, but Fulham, knowing that would happen again this summer, have actually started to make a few moves. And I'm hoping, I agree, that the war chest sort of opens now that we know that this one's been finalised. Like I said, it's just important for us to actually make some movements in the next couple of weeks. I don't want any of these deals to drag out. I know we try and get the best possible deals, and sometimes that does mean that these deals do drag out, but I think now is the time to move quickly. I really hope that we see that happen. I guess, Dad, regarding Palhinha, any sort of thoughts on the gap that's going to be left? Joao's led the Premier League and the whole of Europe in tackles and intercepts across the last couple of seasons. How irreplaceable is that going to be? Do you think we're really going to struggle to find someone of the same level, or do you feel like we could potentially still bring in someone who can fill that gap?
Once again, I'm very confident that Marco's had a lot of time to think about this, and I think um, what is very encouraging about Marco is he's not reactive. I think he's a very long-term player. I think he's got a plan. I'd like to think that this is not a new story, and so the planning has been around. Okay, what's next for Fulham? I don't know that we could really achieve our very, very best with Joao um, in that role. I think for Marco's ideal setup, I think he wants someone at a higher skill level, without any disrespect to Joao, has not even left the building yet. But from a passing perspective and a playmaking perspective, I just fancy that Marco would prefer, you know, uh, well, players of the likes that have been linked. So if we get the right players in on the back of this, I'm actually very optimistic about where this goes. I think it's exciting.
Well,
Um,
I think there's the opportunity if you look at signing someone like Zhao for 20 million in the first place. The fact that we now potentially have 40 million to spend on bringing a couple of players in who,
Absolutely.
maybe not the same caliber as Zhao, as he's obviously a world class defensive midfielder, but even players who have the potential to reach that same level, to be able to bring in two players for the price or for the sale price of one. I think you're right. It is exciting to see what happens, and especially when you look at players that we've been linked with, like Andre. I'd love to see him playing in the Premier League and see how he fits within this Fulham system. And maybe this is the chance for that sort of rebuild we've been hoping for. The last couple of seasons we've had a lot of stability, which is good in a sense, but it's almost a good time to bring in some fresh faces, and we're kind of forced into it with Tosin leaving. We still haven't heard final news on Willian and Decordova-Reid, but when you're losing, a couple of core members of your squad who, make 20, 30 appearances every season, it is a good opportunity to revamp and refresh, and I do hope we bring in some interesting faces, and I think the next couple of weeks are going to be key for us. I'm looking forward to seeing the direction that we go and hopefully seeing some good news coming fairly soon. Um,
Well, the other side of it is that um, given that we look like losing such key players, it seems inconceivable that the club aren't kind of forced to really make some interesting and exciting signings. They have to.
hmm. Well, I agree. They definitely have to. It's just, I mean, they had to replace Mitrovic last season. Did they? No. But again, you could potentially argue that was down to the timing of everything and how that all played out. So I think for me now, it's that there are no excuses. We have the time, we have the funds. We shouldn't fall into the same trap that we did last year where we just ran out of an opportunity to replace key players. We've identified those players. We have the money available to purchase those players. When you look at players like Smith Rowe, Trevor Chalobah, Andre, these are guys who we've been heavily linked with, and we should expect to sign for the club in the coming days. It's just a matter of if they actually do now, and if they don't, then there's a deeper problem there in Fulham's recruitment program or the system that they decide to stick with. It's obviously not working to the same level that it should be, because Marco Silva obviously wants these players, which is why we're linked with them, but we're not getting deals over the line properly. So like I said, it's key that we get deals done in the very immediate future, because if we don't start to replace players like Palhinha, Willian, Tosin very soon, we're going to run into problems come the start of the season. And as we talked about in the last pod, we've got an opportunity at the start of the season to maybe not take 3 points off Man United, but with Leicester and Ipswich right behind that, that should be 6 points. And if it's not 6 points, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, because we've got an opportunity to get off to a brilliant start but you need the squad there and the squad depth there right from the start of the season. If we push it right to the end of September when the transfer window closes, we miss that opportunity to pick up 6 what could be potentially very easy points for us. So it's an interesting time to be following transfer news at the moment for Fulham and just following Fulham in general. Before we finish up, I did want to make a mention of another bit of transfer news, which might have slipped under most people's radars today, but Mary Southgate has announced on Twitter today that she'll be leaving Fulham this season. For those who don't follow the women's team as closely as we do, Mary has been with Fulham for the last 8 years. She's been captain for 7.5 of those years. 160 appearances, which I think might be a record for Fulham women's team. It definitely is since their re-establishment. Just a club legend, really, and someone who leads from the front, leads with performances on the pitch, leads with attitude. Dad, we were talking just before we started recording this about the impact losing someone like that has on a team, especially one that's pushing for promotion this season and came so close last season. How big an impact do you think losing one of those older heads in the dressing room, someone who's been there and done it and has that experience, will have on a team who's chasing promotion?
Look, significant, and I hope it's not mortal. And I think the other dimension there is that, Mary Southgate could be one of the very few Fulham fans in the change room. So that's another dimension that surely, adds to her drive and passion and desire for the team to succeed. Not that I think that affects the other girls, but she is the full package and has very much led from the front with that not in mind, but as part of a whole Fulham persona, I guess. So yeah, look, I think I'm glad you mentioned it. I think it's right that we acknowledge the role that she's played and the contribution she's made, and yeah, sad to see her go, and we wish her all the best, obviously, and wherever she lands next, we don't know that yet, but yeah, we wish her all the best. Thanks for the service.
Yeah, I think it'll be a big loss. Like I said, when you're pushing for promotion, you have those crunch games. You do want someone who just has that experience and that calm, and that's something that Mary always had with the club. Is whenever she was on the field, she seemed to bring a sense of calm to the back line. A bit of a rock at the back, the ability to just instill faith in her teammates. So I think it is going to be a big loss. It's coming to that point during the off season where the Fulham women's team have their contract negotiations, and I expect we'll find out in the coming days and coming weeks about how that goes with the rest of the squad. It was obviously a squad that came very close to promotion this year. I'm sure there's going to be a few tough calls to make this time round to try and find that right balance of getting a team who's going to just go that step further. So we'll definitely keep an ear out on that and report that as it comes through. But yeah, just to echo what you said, I think it's a big loss to have someone like that who's been at the club for 8 years, been club captain for such a long time. It's the Fulham women's version of Tom Kearney, and I think if Tom Kearney was leaving the club this season, there'd be a lot of people taking notice and a lot of people spreading the word, and I think Mary probably deserves the same, being captain of a team for such a long time and being Fulham through and through, especially as a supporter who I believe she's a season ticket holder still and goes to most of the games. So it'll be a big loss for the club, but I'm sure Mary will continue to support Fulham going forward as well, and we do wish her the best in whatever she does next.
Does that mean that I can keep my song that I made for her, and whenever I see her in the crowd, and maybe just tweet it or something like that?
100%.
Okay.
And it also means we're going to have to get a few new songs coming as well for any new signings. I hope you've got an Andre one up your sleeve already, because I don't. So we're going to have to work on that pretty soon. Dad, I think we can wrap it up there, especially as it's approaching 11:30 p.m. here in WA. So thanks for jumping on last minute to have a bit of a chat about the news that's come out recently. We'll definitely keep people updated. We're looking to podcast more regularly now the season is sort of back in full swing. So thank you again for jumping on tonight.
Yeah, good. Glad to do it.
Thanks to everyone who joined in for the podcast that we recorded the other day. We really appreciate all the support. As anyone who's following along on the YouTube can see, we got a bit of a new look this year. We had a few technical difficulties first time around, but hopefully this live stream's coming through a little clearer this time. So please do keep an eye out on our YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast, but also subscribe on the YouTube channel as well to get updates about when we go live. Thank you again to everyone for all your support as always, and as always, come on you Whites.